All right, so you've given us this weightlifting training database book thing.
Yeah.
And I guess our mission today is to sort of deep dive into this thing and pull out some of the
gems.
Yeah, the gems, the key knowledge.
Yeah, the insights.
Yeah, and specifically for you listening. So
Say.
you don't have to wade through all of this yourself. So
Yeah. This database is really pretty comprehensive.
It is.
It starts with exercises for really sometimes overlooked muscles like your neck.
Yeah.
And goes, all the way down through, some pretty detailed routines for your legs and core.
Yeah. Like when we say everything, we mean it.
We do.
It's like, how to strengthen your neck safely,
Yeah.
how to build powerful traps, sculpt your shoulders. And I mean, there's a huge variety of different movements for your shoulder.
And it goes way beyond just the upper body.
Oh, yeah.
It gets into chest exercises.
Yeah.
From, every different angle.
Yeah.
Routines for building, really impressive triceps, biceps.
Yeah.
And it even gets into, specific exercises for your forearms, which, not a lot of people think about, but are really important for grip strength and overall arm development.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, we get into the core. So, exercises for building like a really strong, defined core.
Yeah.
And then into the powerhouse muscles of the legs. Yeah. Your quads, glutes, hamstrings, and calves.
That's right.
So this thing really leaves no muscle untouched.
It doesn't. And what's, I think, also really useful is the way that it kind of categorizes the exercises too.
Yeah.
Breaks things down into isolation movements.
Right.
Where you're really focusing on one specific muscle.
Right.
Compound exercises where you're working multiple muscle groups at the same time.
Right.
And then even, isometric exercises.
Right. Which
is where you're contracting the muscle, but there's no movement.
Right.
So,
yeah, and whatever your preferred equipment is.
Okay.
Whether it's just body weight exercises, stuff you can do anywhere.
Yeah.
The, foundational barbells, dumbbells, machines, it's all in here.
It's all covered.
And
beyond just the exercises themselves.
Yeah.
We're also going to be looking at some of the fundamental training principles that are talked about, like, how to structure your sets and reps, why grip and stance are so important for different lifts,
right.
and really how all those factors come together to influence your results.
Absolutely. But we're not done yet.
Not even close.
Because you also had some specific areas of interest.
Yeah.
And luckily our source here kind of delves into those as well.
It does.
So we're gonna break down like the basics of bulking and cutting.
Right.
The strategic phases of gaining muscle and then sort of leaning out, right?
Exactly.
And we'll touch upon some key aspects of diet as well, like how to think about your calorie intake,
right,
and even the timing of your meals.
Absolutely.
And then
we'll also touch upon the role of cardio.
Yeah.
Looking at both steady state cardio and also HIIT, high intensity interval training.
Right.
And then, the source even gets into the use of supplements.
Yeah.
And that classic strength building approach.
Right.
The 5x5 training principle. So a lot to cover.
I mean, if you were trying to absorb all of this on your own, it could definitely feel like drinking from a fire hose.
Absolutely.
So that's why we're here.
That's what we're here for.
To be your guides through this weightlifting training database.
That's right.
Our goal for this deep dive today is to give you that solid foundation of understanding.
Exactly.
So you can, save yourself some time.
Yeah.
And really feel confident, applying these principles to your own training.
That's the goal.
So, all right, let's unpack this thing, starting right at the top.
Right at the top.
With exercises for the neck.
The neck. So what's fascinating about this is that it really emphasizes strengthening the neck in a way that minimizes the risk of injury.
Right.
It starts out with these isometric exercises.
Right.
Which, I think that's a really smart approach because these muscles, they're often overlooked.
Yeah.
But they're really crucial for, overall posture and even injury prevention when you're doing other lifts.
Right.
And this method allows you to build strength and stability without putting your neck through a bunch of, potentially risky movements.
Yeah. Like the isometric neck exercise front and back. It's pretty straightforward.
It is.
You're either sitting or standing with a neutral head and neck.
Yep.
And you just place your hands on your forehead and gently push forward and resist that movement with your neck muscles. And that's what we call an isometric contraction.
An isometric contraction.
Right. You're contracting, but there's no movement.
Yeah.
Right. And then you do the same thing with your hands on the back of your head.
That's right.
Pushing backwards, resisting.
Yeah.
And the book even notes that you can apply that same isometric resistance on the sides of your head as well.
That's right.
So
yeah. And then, there's the isometric neck exercise sides.
Right.
Which, again, seated or standing with a neutral head.
Right.
You place your left hand on the left side of your head, and you gently push inwards.
Right.
Resisting with your neck muscles, and then repeat on the right side.
Right.
So, again, very simple.
Yeah.
But effective way to build some strength in these muscles without, having to go through a large range of motion.
Yeah, exactly. And for those of you who, are interested in exercises, using equipment, the source briefly mentions a few others, like the lying face down plate neck resistance, where you're lying on your stomach and you're resisting against a plate on the back of your head. The lying face up plate neck resistance, which I guess would be the opposite. Yeah. You're lying on your back.
Right.
And then the standing head harness neck resistance, which uses a harness to add weight. But it seems like, the isometric exercises are kind of the foundational recommendation.
Yeah, I think so, especially if you're new to training your neck.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you're doing it in a safe and effective way.
Right.
So starting with those isometric holds is a really, really smart way to go.
Absolutely.
So moving down the body a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the trapezius muscles.
Yes.
Or the traps.
The traps.
Which are often overlooked, I think.
Yeah, they often are. And what stands out to me about this section
is how directly it targets these upper back muscles.
Right.
The traps play a really significant role in shoulder stability.
Yeah.
And even neck support.
Right.
So, it starts out with the barbell shrug.
Right. Which is a classic.
It's a classic.
Yeah.
And the description here is pretty clear.
Yeah. You grab a barbell with a pronated grip. That's palms facing down.
Yep.
Slightly wider than shoulder width. You stand with your feet shoulder width apart,
right,
and you let the bar hang at arm's length.
Yep.
And then you simply raise your shoulders straight up as high as you can. Like you're trying to touch your ears.
To your ears, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and the book even mentions that you can add like a semicircular rotation as you're shrugging up.
Yeah.
Moving from front to back.
Yeah.
And also that this exercise could be, effectively done using dumbbells instead of a barbell.
Yeah. All right. Now the barbell shrug behind the back.
Yeah. So this one is mentioned as another exercise for the traps.
Right.
But this particular excerpt doesn't really provide any specific instructions on how to do it.
Right. But the low pulley rota neck?
The low pulley rota neck, yeah.
This is kind of interesting.
It is.
It's like it's not your
typical
standard seated row.
No. And the key difference here is that you're using a rope handle attached to a low pulley, and you're pulling it all the way up to neck height.
Right.
So you sit at the seated row machine, grab the rope with a palms down grip.
Right.
Keep a slight bend in your knees.
Yeah.
And you want to keep your back straight.
Right.
Almost completely vertical.
Right.
So try to avoid leaning back as you pull.
Right.
And then you pull that rope back up towards your neck.
Right.
Allowing your elbows to flare out to the sides.
Right.
So it's described as a compound exercise.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because this movement, also engages your biceps.
Right.
The muscles of your middle back.
Right.
And even your shoulders.
Right.
So
so if we connect this to like the bigger picture,
yeah.
I mean, the traps are really crucial for so many upper body movements, right? Yeah. They really contribute to overall strength and stability.
Absolutely.
So including targeted exercises like these are really important for comprehensive upper body development.
I completely agree.
Oh.
So moving on.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the shoulders.
Oh, the shoulders.
Which the database covers with a particularly wide variety.
Yeah, this section's huge.
It is. It's extensive.
Let's see. One of the more unique exercises is the bent press.
The bent press.
This sounds like something you might see in like old films of
Of strongman.
Strongman, right.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating about this one
Yeah.
is its historical significance.
Yeah.
This is an exercise that's often attributed to, legendary figures like Eugene Sandow.
Yeah.
And the description really highlights the unique, almost corkscrewing motion that's required to lift the weight.
Right.
Whether it's a barbell, a dumbbell, or even a kettlebell.
Right.
Overhead with just one hand.
Yeah.
By kind of skillfully maneuvering your body underneath it.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly technical.
It does.
And requiring a lot of coordination.
It does.
And they get into some specific details about, your foot positioning, how the weight begins under your hip, how you bend your knee on your non-lifting side as the opposite knee gets closer to the ground.
Yeah.
For balance.
Yeah.
A key seems to be generating power by driving off of your hip.
Yeah.
And keeping your eye focused on the weight.
Eye on the weight.
Yeah, throughout the entire lift.
Absolutely.
This is definitely not a casual exercise.
Yeah.
This demands
serious
concentration.
Concentration and practice.
And practice, yeah. So.
And then we move into the power clean.
All right, the power clean.
Which is
no, this is a
complex and powerful full body movement.
Yeah.
That you often see in Olympic weightlifting.
Right.
And the breakdown here is quite detailed. It starts out with the crucial beginning position.
Right. So you start with a shoulder width stance.
Yep.
Feet flat on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Your grip on the barbell is pronated.
Yeah.
Again, that's palms facing down.
Mm-hmm.
Slightly wider than shoulder width.
Right.
And you're in a squat position with your heels on the floor, arms fully extended, elbows pointing outwards.
Mm-hmm.
The bar itself should be positioned over the balls of your feet, very close to your shins. And then you need to make sure you have a flat back and that your shoulders are positioned either directly over or slightly in front of the barbell.
That's right.
That's a lot to get, right?
It is a lot of details.
Yeah.
But, they all play a role in performing the lift correctly and safely.
Absolutely.
So now the upward movement is broken down into 3 distinct phases.
Okay.
The first pull involves extending your knees while simultaneously moving your hips forward and raising your shoulders at the same rate.
Right.
It's important to maintain a constant angle of your back throughout this phase and to lift the bar straight upwards, keeping it close to your body and your elbows straight.
Right.
So.
All right. Then we go into the transition phase.
The transition,
or the scoop,
often called the scoop.
Right.
And here you powerfully thrust your hips forward and continue pulling the bar upwards.
Right.
Until your knees are positioned directly underneath it.
Okay.
Your feet remain flat on the floor, and your torso becomes almost completely vertical.
Okay.
With your shoulders still positioned directly over the bar,
right,
and your elbows remaining fully extended.
Right. So, and then finally, the second pull.
The second pull.
This is where the explosive power comes into play.
This is it.
Right. So as the bar brushes against your thighs, you straighten your torso completely.
Yep.
And you forcefully extend your knees, hips, and ankles in a jumping action.
Almost like a jumping action. That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Your shoulders should remain over the bar.
For as long as possible.
For as long as possible, yeah.
Yeah.
Elbows move out to the sides. You keep the bar close to your body.
Close to the body, right.
Right. Yeah. And then at the peak of this movement, you shrug your shoulders upwards.
That's right.
And begin to pull with your arms.
Yeah.
Keeping your elbows high above your wrists.
High elbows.
Yeah. To really maximize the height that the bar reaches.
Exactly.
And then all of that power generation leads into
the catch.
The catch.
Right.
So this is where you quickly rotate your elbows underneath the bar. You slightly hyperextend your wrists.
Yep.
And bring your elbows forward and upwards, allowing the bar to rest across the front of your shoulders.
To be racked.
Or be racked, right?
Across the front of your shoulders.
Yeah, across the front of your shoulders.
Yeah.
At the same time, you're flexing your hips and knees to kind of absorb the impact.
To absorb the impact of the weight.
Yeah. Now, from this racked position, you can then perform an overhead press.
You can, without moving your feet.
Right. So you press the bar to a full arm's length above your head, allowing for a slight incline of your trunk.
Yeah.
But keeping your legs firmly braced.
My legs braced.
Yeah. And then the downward movement of the bar is controlled lowering back to your thighs.
Right.
And then to the floor.
That's right.
And as with any complex lift.
Oh, absolutely.
Proper breathing is essential.
Breathing is key.
Right.
So the technique that's described here involves inhaling deeply before you initiate that first pull.
Right.
Holding your breath through the second pull, exhaling forcefully at the point of the shrug, and then inhaling again during the controlled downward movement for subsequent repetitions.
Yeah.
So it's a highly coordinated and incredibly powerful lift.
Olympic lifts are incredibly effective, I think, for developing explosive power, coordination, full body strength. Which makes them, valuable for athletes in various disciplines.
Yeah, various disciplines, but this is something that
requires significant practice.
Requires a lot of practice and ideally guidance from a qualified coach.
Absolutely. I mean, these are not lifts that you want to just kind of figure out on your own.
Yeah.
You really want to have someone who knows what they're doing to guide you through the proper technique.
Yeah, absolutely. So the source also mentions the Cuban press.
Cuban press. Which is another shoulder exercise.
Right. But it doesn't
go into
the specifics.
The specifics. Yeah. Okay. So moving on to a more isolation-focused movement that really targets the front of your shoulders. We have the front plate raise.
The front plate raise, yeah. This one is a relatively simple and direct exercise. You stand holding a weight plate at the 3 and 9 o'clock positions.
Right.
So imagine it like a steering wheel.
Yeah.
With your palms facing each other.
Right.
And your arms held straight or with a very slight bend. And then you simply raise the plate in front of you to slightly above shoulder level.
Right.
Focusing on the contraction in the front of your shoulders.
Right.
And then you lower it back down in a controlled manner.
Yeah, exactly. And then the lying one-arm lateral raise.
Lying one-arm lateral raise, yep.
Which this is designed to really isolate that side deltoid muscle.
Yeah, the side deltoid.
Of the shoulder.
So here you lie on your side on a bench.
Right.
With a dumbbell in your top hand.
Right.
You extend that arm so the dumbbell's in front of you and slightly downwards.
Right.
Then raise it in a controlled arc directly above your body.
Right.
Keeping a slight bend in your elbow. And really focusing on using your shoulder muscles to lift the weight.
Right.
Your lower arm and legs are primarily there to kind of provide counterbalance.
Right. Yeah.
And maintain stability on the bench.
Right.
And then the one-arm side laterals offer a slightly different approach.
Slightly different approach.
That can allow you to potentially lift heavier.
Yeah, potentially heavier. So here you might use a strap to secure your working hand to the dumbbell for a better grip. And you'd use your free hand to hold on to a stable object for support.
Right.
So you lean slightly into the side of your working shoulder.
Right.
And then raise that dumbbell out to the side.
Right.
Until your upper arm is parallel to the floor.
Right.
Pausing briefly at the top.
Yeah.
And then lowering the weight slowly.
Right.
And this variation is highlighted as being particularly effective for targeting the side deltoids.
Yeah, absolutely.
The push press is an exercise that builds upon that power clean by starting with the barbell already positioned at your shoulder.
At your shoulders, that's right. Yeah.
Right. So you initiate the movement with a quick slight dip of your hips and knees while keeping your torso upright. Right? Yeah. And then you immediately follow that with an explosive push.
Yep.
Using the powerful extension of your legs and arms.
Legs and arms.
Yeah.
To drive the bar overhead.
Right.
To a locked out position. Yeah. So it's a technique.
Right.
That allows you to lift, more weight overhead.
Right.
Than you could with just a strict shoulder press.
Right. Exactly.
No.
So the side press is a rather interesting and perhaps less common exercise.
Yeah, less common.
With some historical significance.
It does. It does. So here you start with a dumbbell or a kettlebell held at chest or shoulder level. Somewhat similar to the starting position of an Arnold press.
Okay.
However, as you As you raise the weight with one hand,
Yeah.
you simultaneously twist your torso
Okay.
and bend your opposite hip outwards.
Oh, wow.
And this movement is reportedly quite effective for not only working the shoulder,
Right.
but also kind of contributing to the thickening of your torso.
Wow.
So
And then there's the snatch.
the snatch, yeah.
Another highly technical,
Highly
and dynamic Olympic lift.
It is similar to the power clean.
Yeah.
The description starts out with a very detailed explanation of the starting position, emphasizing the stance, which can be shoulder width or even wider.
Right.
The grip.
Yeah.
Using either a pronated closed grip or the more secure hook grip, and then the overall posture. Making sure you have a flat back, proper alignment, all those details.
Right.
So
so the upward movement in the snatch also involves a first pull, a transition or scoop phase.
A scoop.
Right.
Yeah.
And a second pull. However, due to the goal of lifting the bar to a much greater height. To catch it overhead in one fluid motion.
Yeah, in one fluid motion.
These phases are even more focused on generating
speed and explosiveness. Speed and explosiveness compared to the power clean.
To the catch.
This is a critical moment.
Yeah. As the bar reaches its peak height, you quickly move underneath it, flexing slightly at your hips and knees, and simultaneously rotating your elbows and fully extending your arms.
To lock the bar out overhead. Yep.
Ideally, your feet will make contact with the floor, in your receiving stance, just before the bar is fully locked out.
Yeah.
And then you absorb the weight.